When people told an individual story about individuals, not a client, not a company, not a brand, about a person, an individual, where we have a connection with a character in a story, oxytocin levels increased as well. You've got the brain activated, you've got the hormones activated. If you're not telling stories, start telling stories now. Stories will change your life in every single presentation. But you know the most magical part about stories is they are memorable.
Please welcome Mr. Warren Tate.
The greatest leaders of countries, the greatest leaders of businesses, and the greatest leaders of people just also happen to be the greatest communicators, the greatest presenters, and the greatest storytellers. The great news is that this skill set of communication and presentation skills, and more importantly of storytelling, is a learnt skill. I wasn't born like this, thank God my mother said. But it was 10 years ago, on the 24th of June. Now, I want you all to remember that date, please, because it happens to be my birthday. Write it down, it's coming up. I look forward to the presents. It was my very first keynote presentation. I was the CEO of a Bayside real estate franchise group, of which I had tripled its size. I was starting to get noticed as a thought leader in my industry. I was implementing new tech strategies, marketing strategies, and people were starting to notice. And it was at that time I received a phone call from Darren, a CEO of another organisation of a similar size. He said, "Tatey," I said, "Daz, how are you?" He said, "Mate, we've got a conference coming up for our franchisees, and I'd like you to speak in front of our 29 franchisees. It's going to be on the Gold Coast." I said, "I'm there." He said, "We'll fly you up, we'll get a driver for you, and we'll pay you $3,000. I said, "I'm in." Oh, by the way, it's on the 24th of June. I got the phone, I thought, how good's this? My very first speaking engagement happens to be on my birthday, and they're going to pay me handsomely for it. So I prepared a few slides, put a slide deck together, started to prepare my presentation. I was putting together some pretty good stuff. I mean, I went through it a few times. I thought, this is good. I like this content. I mean, of course I would. I've been doing this for the last 3 years. I know this stuff. So I flew up to the Gold Coast. I went up in an elevator at this 5-star resort and walked through these doors of a penthouse apartment. I thought, these guys know how to run a conference. So there was 29 franchisees sitting there in theatre style in front of me. All I could see was the blue sky and the ocean behind. It was fabulous. I got a great introduction. I started my presentation. I was getting nothing. God, you're ungrateful. So I kept going and I kept putting more energy in. I was getting nothing. Oh shit, so I started getting nervous, so I started to speak quicker. And then I ran out of material. Looked at the clock, 35 minutes to go of a 90-minute presentation. I thought, oh shit. And you know those speakers when they're on stage and you see that oh shit moment because you can see it in their face. So for the next 15 minutes, I continued to waffle. And about 15 minutes ago, I said, I'm done. I said, thank you very much. And everybody sort of looked at each other, then they've looked at me, and I've got this from about 3 or 4 people in the room. I felt sick. Darren saw me to the doors. He said, thanks, Tatey. It wasn't quite what I was hoping for, but I suppose it was good enough. Thanks, mate. Popped the check in my top pocket, and I walked out. I walked out of there, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? For 3 years, I've built up my reputation as a thought leader in the industry. I've made big changes to an organisation. I'm starting to be seen, and I've just ruined it in one presentation. People are going to talk. I felt sick, and I felt embarrassed. On the flight back from Melbourne, I decided I was never, ever, 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 ever going to do that again, and I was going to upgrade this skill. I was going to pursue the best of the best in the world to master this skill set of being able to present and talk in front of everybody. So I went to courses. I sought out the best in the world. And I continued to master my craft. To this day, I still do this. But what I discovered was that the art of storytelling was the number one secret, the key, the magic bullet to every single presentation. Business stories is a leadership tool. Telling stories in business presentations has the power to influence the entire audience. Business story becomes your strategic weapon in every single presentation. Now, this isn't new. I'm sure you've all thought, well, there's plenty of people that have been telling business stories for quite some time. Exactly, there has been. Elon Musk has already been mentioned. Indra Nooyi already been mentioned, CEO of PepsiCo. And of course, the great late Steve Jobs, one of the best at telling stories. In fact, there's a whole book on his ability to tell stories. Stories have the ability to influence people beyond belief. It has the power to transform them. There is magic in every single story. But what I've discovered over the years in working with Fortune 500 companies around the world, prop tech startups, in fact, I was online only this morning to a company in the US discussing their pitch from stage for some VC funding. What I discovered that many of these people out here in the world of the executives, the business world, believe that they're telling stories. They believe to this day. They through and through. I'm telling stories every single time. Absolutely, I am, Warren. And then I get them to present. And they're presenting case studies, not stories. Case studies are research and data around individual cases that they present as part of their evidence to justify what they're doing. They're not stories. Stories about people, where we have a connection with people. Stories is where we connect with individuals, not with companies, brands, or not with case studies or numbers. It's fascinating when you really uncover it and when you drill deep down, the case studies aren't stories. The people say, so Warren, why are they so important? Why are stories that important? How do they work? Well, it's quite simple if you study it like I do. There is a study in neuroscience where they've actually monitored brain patterns of the storyteller and the story listener. And what happens when you tell a compelling story is that the same parts of the brain light up at exactly the same moment as in the listener. Exactly the same time. You're communicating at a whole other level that you never thought was possible. It's called neurocoupling, and it's been proven in neuroscience. Is that Mum? Tell her I'll be late. But one of the biggest challenges we find is, but how do I include story? What, again, really, are they that important? So, well, Harvard Business Review had a study where they took blood samples of the audience. Yes, that's right, we're taking blood samples of you shortly. Where they measured oxytocin levels, a hormone level in your bloodstream. It's the connection hormone, or better known as the love hormone. When people told an individual story about individuals, not a client, not a company, not a brand, about a person, an individual, where we have a connection with a character in a story, oxytocin levels increased as well. You've got the brain activated. You've got the hormones activated. If you're not telling stories, start telling stories now. Stories will change your life in every single presentation. But you know the most magical part about stories is they are memorable. A good story will never be forgotten. It was 3 years ago, I was at Sydney Airport, I was sitting in the lounge and I had a gentleman opposite me looking at me and I thought, that's strange. I continued on to my laptop, I looked up and he was looking at me again and he smiled. And he said, how are those saints going? But one, how did he know about this? I said, sorry, do I know you? He's gone, no, probably not. But I attended a talk of yours 2 years ago up in Newcastle. And I still remember that you spread your dad's ashes over the ground at Moorabbin there for St Kilda. But I still remember the business story that he taught you. I thought, wow, they work. Stories work. So as leaders, as people within organisations, we take people on a journey. We take them on a venture. You want people to follow you as visionary leaders. The biggest challenge that you have is, how are you going to get them to follow you? And you do a visualisation story. And here it is. With a visualisation story, you need to describe where are you currently, what's going on within your organisation, what's happening, and what are the challenges that you're facing. Then, what changes are you wanting them to implement? What are the drastic improvements that you're wanting to put forward to have them follow you on that journey? And then visualise and illustrate that future image of what that looks like. When you do this in a masterful way using individuals and characters, they will follow you and they will work with you to achieve that outcome. It's magic. So the biggest challenge that you face is you are looking to implement strategies and changes within your workplace. You have a great deal of knowledge. You have a great deal of ideas and visions for your organisations, but how are you going to implement them? You know, communication is the only thing that you can do that will have massive influence over every single staff member. And if you deliver a presentation with confidence, with certainty and with clarity, you watch the difference that it makes. So imagine that you hire a group of people who coach and train people around the world, a group of experts who master the craft of communication. You learn the art and craft and science behind story. You tell compelling stories that people are on the edge of their seats just leaning in and listening, and you think, wow, this is working. And then better still, at the end of that conversation, people come up to you, people that you've wanted to interact with and influence are now coming to you rather than you needing to find them. That's the power of story. You and your team are only one moment away and one perfectly practiced story away from making the breakthrough that you were looking for. Thank you.